In Sales Clinic, this time we have two great individuals talking about coaching and the impact of coaching, Matt Somers and Ahmed Bader. Welcoming them both into the Sales Clinic. So today's topic has been on coaching and the importance of coaching for organizations, and what is the impact of bringing that culture of coaching within the organization. And we have Matt Somers, as I had introduced in the beginning, and Ahmed with us, two powerful forces in our sales clinic this week. So thank you so much for your time. And so Matt, my first question is to you. Everybody believes that we should be coaching, but very few people really understand the depth and the impact of it. So, and the bigger question comes in is that at what point should organization consider to have coaches for their, not only their sales teams, but across, because, like we discussed, it's more of a cultural change. At what point should they consider that you need to bring in coaches for their teams? And what's the impact of that?
Okay. So I think the short answer is now. They should bring them in now, today, by close of business, because why would you wait to have the benefits of coaching? But I think that probably depends as well on a distinction that we can make quite earlier on between external coaches, so-called exec coaches that you might hire on a short-term basis, versus internal coaches who are existing managers and leaders within the organization that you might train in coaching skills and have them add that to their leadership style. There's no reason why you can't have both, and there's no reason why you can't have both going on at the same time, of course. But they are slightly different, so that's one aspect to that. I think is to think about the internal versus the external. But either way, Lena, I think in my experience, it's a question of, well, it's usually because something is changing.
Right.
The business has maybe gone through some change, perhaps an acquisition or a merger, or it's won an incredibly large new account or lost one, or there's some other change going on, seems to be the precursor to coaching, because the feeling will be there is some kind of new world that people are moving into, and we need to equip them to be able to cope with that. And of course, now more than ever, we've been through a universal change in the last 12 to 18 months with COVID and the pandemic and the lockdowns and all of that caused working from home and being remote based, communicating virtually,
right,
et cetera. So, who's not experiencing change right now? Therefore, right. I come back to my earlier answer is, there is no better time than now, really, I don't think, to introduce coaching.
So why is it so difficult to take that decision? Because I've seen that, many organizations, when they have to invest in their teams, especially in their sales teams, which I've seen, from the coaching perspective, they're okay to invest in sales training, sales consulting, hiring the right people. But when it comes to coaching, they seem to be seeing it as more, nice to have than a must to have. Why is that mindset? Have you come across that? Because you've been coaching for the last 3 decades and plus, so you must have come across these challenges, because that's one area every time clients feel, which I have heard that, we'll think about it. We need it, but it's a nice to have. It's not a must to have. Ahmed, I'm not too sure if you come across this experience, because your view as well on this, both of you.
Yeah, I would have to agree. A lot of people, and I agree with you as well, not a lot of people are taking steps or enough steps to engage coaching for their teams. And I think I'd have to agree with Matt. The results speak for themselves, but not everybody's on board. I think what it is a lot of people are busy. And a lot of people may not have proof in front of them or a benchmark for what can they expect in terms of performance results as a consequence of coaching. When you talk about team development, they immediately think of training and figuring out what the gaps are and trying to provide them with that. I think training has brings value and definitely helps bridge these gaps and adds to the development and the skills of the team. But it's not the only solution, and it's not the ideal solution for every case. I think coaching in many cases have shown that it gives better results, and also a combination of both. Just like Matt said, you don't need to only stick with coaches that are in-house. You can do combinations, and you can also do combinations of training as well as coaching at the same time. I think the benefits turn out to be better and the results.
Yeah. I'll jump on that, Lena, if I may, because I think the other thing that's a useful element of this discussion is how the benefit of training can be widened and deepened by appending it with coaching.
Yeah.
So if we've got, a content-based sales training program that might be teaching the individuals some sales techniques or some sales processes, but they have coaching in advance of that event, so that by the time they attend the event, they're highly, highly focused on what it is that they want to learn and why they need to learn it. Right. Then they have the event. And then after the event, we do some follow-up type coaching conversations to say, what did you learn? How did you learn it? How are you going to implement it? How will we know if you've been successful, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah. Well, then all of a sudden, the value of that learning event is, it's
amplified
3-4 times. Yeah, amplified. Sorry, that's a great word. Yeah. And you're right. It really is. And I think to come back to the earlier point as to why did we do less coaching? Well, because it's still quite misunderstood, I think.
Okay.
It's confused with training. It's perceived as being, well, that coaching is just training one-on-one, and why would I do that when I can stick 12 or 20 people in a room? And that seems to be an economy of scale, but they are in fact very, very different things.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important point, right? That if you have invested an X amount and a huge amount when it comes to training and, training their teams, irrespective of whether it's sales training or any other training, if it's not packaged or which is not if you don't add coaching to it, then all that what you have done, definitely, the impact is not as much as what you would really like to see. And then probably the, the blame or the reasoning would be that the training was not effective, or the content was not effective. So.
Yeah. Well, that I suppose might be part of the explanation, but it's usually not, in my experience, because training programs are usually pretty well engineered and structured and are very good, but people forget, and they forget quicker if they're not able to implement what they've learned. So if they go on a training program but then only have a handful of chances to implement what they've learned and nobody's following that up with them, well, I don't have the stats in front of me, but there's the well-known phenomenon of the forgetting curve.
Yes.
Which says that this learning that takes place in an event
will
subside very quickly unless it's reinforced. Well, coaching would be a great way of reinforcing that learning. So there's another benefit or a valid reason for doing so.
Right.
Yes. And I think there's to add to that, I guess perhaps there is the inherent belief by managers and top executives that part of, for example, a sales manager's job and a sales leader or any leader in any other department, they have a belief, internal belief, that part of their job and responsibilities is to coach.
Yeah.
Just because they have that belief or that expectations, let's call it doesn't mean that it's happening.
Yeah.
And if it is happening just based on a belief, it's probably happening in a random way. So everybody's doing it at their own rate. They're applying an approach that they may be familiar with. They're doing it at their convenience, and they're not really doing it in a systematic way. We know that when people are formalizing this coaching process, if you would, are really reaping the results of such a practice that's helping their teams develop.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I might also say that I think a lot of what happens that is called coaching probably isn't. So I can think of a handful of occasions where I might be talking to an organization or somebody that I know, and they'll say, oh, yes, we do lots of coaching. We coach our sales team. We coach all sorts of other teams. And I say, well, that's really interesting. Could I come and observe what you do? And yes, they'll say, by all means. But what you see them doing is actually training one by one. It's all technical input, you know, so the sales manager will sit with the salesperson and say, well, here's what I was a really great salesperson, and here's all the wonderful things I did. So why don't you just do that then? And then you'll be a great salesperson as well.
Right.
Well, that's not coaching, frankly. You know, I mean, it's potentially useful, I suppose. But it's a pale shadow of real effective coaching, which would be, what about that individual? How do they learn? How do they deploy their experiences? You know, so I think, again, part of the misinformation or misconceptions that abound is people believe that they're coaching. And if you ask them, do you do coaching? They'd say yes, but they might not be coaching in the way that we would understand it. Yeah,
a formal coaching wherein rather than telling what to do, saying how to is what coaching really means. And I think many times I've come through this, you know, I've seen that it's more of an inhibition or a discomfort for sales leaders or leaders to say that their team needs to be coached, because they believe it's their job to make sure they manage their team and they coach their team. And so they feel that reviewing them or having a discussion with them means coaching. So, you know, I think that's a misconception. Probably.
I can give you a useful anecdote there. So I once I had a client company that was a small business magazine in the part of the UK where I'm based, and they had about half a dozen people, I think, who are on their advertising sales team. You know, so their job would be to get businesses to take out advertising in the magazine. That's a tough sales environment. It really is, you know, because that's a hard sale to make, and you've got to keep doing it. You know, the sales cycle is short because people might take out one advert for one issue, and then you've got to get them to do it again the following month or quarter. So a tough sales gig. Their sales manager was a former physiotherapist at a sports club. This guy had never sold advertising sales in his life. But he was a brilliant coach, you know, because he was so able to get the team motivated. He was so able to spot who was having a great day, who wasn't having such a great day. He could put an arm around the shoulder of people who needed it. He could give a kick up the you know, to those that needed it. His intuitive sense of how to get people to be the best that they could be was what made him a really effective coach. And his credibility was not because he'd once been the top salesperson. I mean, he hadn't, you know, he'd never been on the tools, if you see what I mean. So he had to find his credibility through a different way. And that was by being a great coach. You know, his people recognized that he would help them be the best that they could be. And whether he could do the job or not was largely irrelevant, because he wasn't going to. You know, the idea was, and you see this kind of in sports sometimes as well.
Absolutely.
You know, this idea now that the best player makes the best coach has been proven a myth. Often the reverse is true. Some of the best coaches in sport were themselves quite modest performers, but their skill is getting the best out of other people.
Exactly.
And that's a useful inroad, I think, into properly understanding what coaching is all about, and into properly understanding what the best coaches do.
Right. Yeah. Coaches are those who probably don't play with you, but play, they actually play along with you and make sure that the best comes out of the, you know, identifying your strengths and strengthening that further. That's predominantly what coaches. Ahmed, you had some stats which you were talking about as the impact of, coaching and how organizations benefit. Would you want to share some?
Sure. If you give me some of the sharing rights, I will be more than happy to share it with you and demonstrate.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. Well, it's just one quick slide that I thought we would share with people here. And what this slide is really showing us is the impact of coaching. Now, I come from with a Miller-Hyman's background and a Miller-Hyman school when it comes to complex sales. And with Miller-Hyman, they had defined four stages for sales maturity. And in each one of the stages, they've also looked at the role of coaching in terms of developing the internal sales process. So they've defined the first one that's on the left. This is when coaching is left up to the managers. This is the random sales stage. And then when sales process becomes informal, also informal coaching happens. And this is where, there are some rules and some guides, suggestions are put in place, but really nobody's reading policy or following policy. They're still kind of doing, their best at whatever they can. When it's formal, it means that there are guidelines, there are suggested times, people need to follow a certain process. People are being asked about it. But then really the best stage is when the sales process and coaching is dynamic. So it's being improved, it's being followed, it's being monitored. And sometimes a sales manager's compensation may be impacted by whether they're doing coaching or not and helping improve the process. The interesting thing to see is the impact of dynamic coaching on the company's results or the sales results.
Wow. And you see,
I think it's significant.
Yeah.
I think these are the percentages of win results. So you have a team where coaching is random. They're barely making 42%. In terms of win rate on their opportunities. Well, you know what? This performance 41% or 42% is well below the chances that you take when you go to Vegas and you put your money on red or black on a roulette table. But it improves slowly. You could see the impact there. The more dynamic your coaching, the more mature your sales process, as well as the more mature your coaching process is for the team. And I think that the difference between random and dynamic are significant for any organization.
Right.
And I can tell you from my own background, my own experience leading a team, where we were able to quadruple sales within 2 years.
Yeah.
And I kid you not when I tell you that I wasn't in the field all that often. I was spending more times with the sales people, helping them build a strategy, formalize their opinion, figure out who do they need to go and talk to, and help them design their own strategies so that they can go to the field and implement and apply all of these. And I followed the school of give them time to learn, be their coach, their advisor, allow them to maybe not make mistakes, but allow them a chance to try their own way and find out where they're comfortable. And soon enough, they had learned all of the things that they needed to be successful in the field, and we all gained the benefits. So instead of having 3 mediocre salespeople and 1 good sales manager, now we had 4 excellent salespeople that we can spread out in the field, and we gained the results of those efforts together. It was wonderful working with them.
I think this actually goes back to what Matt was mentioning, the amplifying effect of, if once, when it is added towards the training, the impact it creates when you consistent, we have a formal process or a dynamic process of coaching, is the results are to be seen in all senses. There'll be a cultural change, there would be revenue enhancement. It could be in any area. It may not be only from the sales perspective, but whichever department you're actually, I
can think of customer service as well.
Yes.
We did projects where the quality assurance team said that people were running away from them. Mm-hmm. Because they didn't want to be monitored. They didn't want to be managed. They literally told me that, people felt that they were micromanaged, and of course they don't like it, but we have to do our job and they have to do theirs. We introduced them to one approach in the coaching that's worked. 3 weeks later, when they reported that people were coming to them, the same people that were running away from them 3 weeks ago, now are coming to them to ask them, to consult them, to get their opinion, to get their advice, and work together on it, and asking the quality assurance people, well, what do you think I could do to perhaps improve? And then, they wouldn't give them the answer. They would actually take them through a conversation and a discussion so that they would discover it themselves. They said the results were amazing. And all it took was 3 weeks. More harmony, better response from the customers. Everybody was much more comfortable, relaxed. There was really teamwork.
Yeah, I think that's the most important part. Yeah, the metamorphosis, which we talk about. Yeah.
What I was excited about.
I'm sorry to interrupt, guys. I think there's just another insight that the graph throws up that might be useful to share, and that's that you could have a second horizontal axis on that, which I think you might call the degree to which the sort of intervention or the coaching is person-centered. So I think if you're leaving it up to managers, it's all about the manager and how they coach, but the dynamic version of that and the increased results come when the coaching is molded to the individual, right?
Yeah.
So again, another useful distinction between training and coaching is that training tends to be content driven. It's about the material in the training.
Yeah.
The coaching at its best will be molded to the needs of that individual at that particular point in time, so they're getting what they need when they need it for their unique situation on their own skills, background and qualifications and their customer base, their territory or whatever, not some kind of generic one size fits all that just gets thrown out there and we hope that some of it stick. I mean, of course there's a place for training, but after a little while, the kind of law of diminishing returns kicks in. And we need something that's molded to the individual, I think. So, and I think that the graph supports that notion.
Yeah. And I think it's training is quite time bound. There are those number of hours, a number of days when coaching becomes consistent, and that's where you see coaching is more consistent. I know there is a time bound to it, and which is the next question I wanted to ask you, that when do you disengage? When in your coaching practice, I mean, do you consistently have this going on, or there is a point at which you disengage?
Yeah, so I think, again, I'm going to make a distinction between the external assignment and the internal.
Right.
As far as external is concerned, I think often a coach like me might be hired for a specific reason to help somebody achieve a specific objective. And if that objective is achieved, well, then job done, time to move on. I think another indication is if the coaching has kind of become a little bit stale, and it can, if a coaching session turns into a bit of a cozy chat, and neither the coach nor the coachee, the executive, whatever, feel that they're sort of making progress, that's probably a time, again, to maybe think about working with a different coach or doing something else. And another time might be where perhaps some other kind of help is needed. I mean, as I was mentioning to you when we first started talking today, Lena, sometimes in an executive coaching assignment, you might find some personal stuff surfacing, which the individual coach may or may not be best placed to handle, So I think it's important that coaches know when to hand off, when to stop, when to refresh.
Right.
That's just as important as engaging in the first place. But I don't think that necessarily applies to internal coaching, because if that's sort of baked into the leadership style, well, why would you turn it off? That doesn't make sense. But so again, external, internal is different, I think.
I also think, to carry on with what Matt is saying, I think it's best when coaching is part of the culture.
Yeah, I was just coming to that. It has to be, I guess.
I mean, if we as people experience the coaching and the benefits of this feedback and somebody helping us, as we try to apply some of the skills and some of the knowledge that we have, and make sure that we're applying it the right way, guiding us to kind of go and get what we need to get to be successful. If we get used to the belief that we're being supported and we need to support others, that in those experiences and those backgrounds and beliefs will lead to us performing and behaving in a certain way that will definitely improve the results. These are the 4 steps of culture. And when that's there, I think it's very attractive. It becomes easier to work in that environment where everybody's supporting each other, and we expect it. And we know that when we coach somebody else, they're open to it. They will need the help. But I don't see it today. I don't see it in a lot of companies. I don't see it as part of the culture. And when it is, it needs sometimes fine tuning. But those who do definitely get the benefits when it comes to their performance results.
So does that also mean that it has to be a top down? There has to be a sponsor who believes in that, that they have to invest in their team, they have to get coached, and it has to be like a part of their plan for the year, and review it and quarterly, half yearly, see what results looks like, kind of fine tune it, required, not required. So there has to be some owners as well internally, right? So is it more a responsibility of the leadership, if you look at it?
I can offer a viewpoint on that, Lena, if you like. I mean, in my experience, which isn't just with sales teams, by the way, I mean, yes. I find coaching opportunities here, there, and everywhere. But I think that whilst it doesn't have to start at the top, in my view, and I've found sort of entry points at different layers of the structure, and you sort of work from where you're at. Right. I think my experience would suggest it's better when it starts on the top. And one thing is crucial: if you're to have a coaching culture, and let's distinguish that from coaching activity, which might be a short-term thing, but a coaching culture, I don't think will sink roots unless the senior team are properly involved and committed, and that means through deed as well as word. So we should see senior leaders both deploying coaching as part of their leadership style and being receptive to it as well. So I would say that's one key component of a coaching culture is senior leadership, proper involvement. Another one is it shouldn't be positioned as just remedial. So if coaching is only ever reached for when something is going wrong, or only ever offered to those people who are sort of, below quota, shall we say, that's not a good cultural message. And so another one would be then perhaps that you make a KPI around it. You have a result that talks about coaching or its impacts. Now, in the early days, that's probably going to need to be a quantitative one, number of coaching sessions per person or something like that. Over time, it can become more qualitative and perhaps linked to, the results that the coached person then we might expect to go on to be achieved. So there has to be a kind of a journey to it. But there's no harm in doing some coaching as a short-term fix, hire someone in to work with an exec on a particular project or a particular aspect of his or her style. Great, but if you want to take it to the cultural level, you're talking about, a serious amount of commitment.
Yeah, I think also the challenge, I don't know whether you faced that, the challenge is when there's a problem and you're asking the person, sending the person to a coaching kind of like number of hours of coaching, and they said that your numbers are down, so we would like to have a coach attached to you. Do you feel that they are ready or they're prepared to be coached? Because already the mindset is that, I got to be coached to get there. So is it more like, do you find a pushback? Because in coaching, if you're not ready to be coached, you cannot coach the person, right? You got to have that person ready. Have you come across that?
Oh, all the time. I mean, I'm often, I think some of my initial inquiries are a little bit about, we've got this person who we can no longer manage or can't think of any fresh ways to manage. Let's hire this guy in from the outside. It's usually a disaster, and I try to avoid them now. And my, as an external coach, my approach is always to have an initial meeting, firstly with the sponsor, the person that's going to be paying for it, and then with the individual concerned. And they're sometimes different when you're doing organizational coaching. It's rare that the individual is paying for it themselves. Correct. So we've got to make sure that everybody's up for it. We've got to make sure that everybody's aligned. That the person sponsoring the coaching has realistic expectations, that the person being coached is ready, and the rapport and the relationship is there with me as a potential outsider. And it's not guaranteed, you know, and there's been coaching assignments that I've walked away from or haven't gone very well because for whatever reason the chemistry just isn't there. There's plenty of other coaches in the world that the person can work with, and there's plenty of other clients, hopefully, for me, you know, so no harm done. So I think it's really important to make sure that everybody is lined up correctly. And I guess that does translate into internal coaching as well. I mean, again, some of those things have got to be in place. There needs to be a relationship of trust. There needs to be the capacity for honest communication, or really you're just going to be playing at the margins and won't get very far.
Yeah, just like going to the doctor, right? You got to be clear and open, or they say never lie to a doctor or lawyer, because if you want to just make sure that you want to see results, then you got to be open. But the challenge when the problem arises and the coaching starts is this: I think the weightlifting or the heavy weight is on the coach, because now he has a challenge to manage. He or she has a challenge to manage the emotional part of the person who's coming to. So what do you do? I mean, generally the suggestion is to walk away from such a situation or try to see if we can still manage it, because the failure rates could be more, right?
Yeah.
Depends
okay. So let me clarify. I mean, I think the walking away might eventually be what needs to happen, but long before that, I think it's about managing realistic expectations about what might be possible over a given time frame, because organizations, again, when it comes to hiring external coaches, of course, have finite resources. They can't pay forever. They can't have a coach coming in 3 times a week necessarily. You know, there are parameters. And so it's a question usually then of getting the 3 people involved, the coach, the clients, the person who's going to be coached, and the sponsor, get them around the table and let's just come up with some aims and objectives that are sensible, you know, and can be accommodated within whatever budget or time frame the organization can accommodate.
Right. And I think it's also a co-creation. It's not only the onus of the coach to create that path, and it's a co-creation. Also, the coachee would come up with his own expectation, his or her own expectations about where they want to see themselves. And then, you know, generally it is looked up as, you know, it's a responsibility of you're the coach, you got to tell me what to do. You know,
again, a lot that goes on that gets called coaching isn't, but in a properly structured coaching relationship, it's the client, the coachee will have the steering wheel.
Yes.
Now the coach will be beside them, helping them come to wise decisions, helping them learn from their experiences. But one of the key principles of coaching, in my view, is responsibility. And I love the way that word sounds, responsibility. It's the clients that has responsibility, you know, because the coach walks away. The coach, excuse me, finishes the call or leaves the building and goes off to see their next client.
Yeah.
Leaving that person with responsibility. They're working day in, day out, you know, that they have to be doing the heavy lifting, I'm afraid. So this idea that a coach comes in and sort of, you know, rescues people, that won't ever get off the ground. You know, responsibility, I think, is misconstrued as this idea that I'm going to be given a lot more stuff to have to do. But in coaching terms, it's this idea that it's the individual themselves who in the end has to make choices and has to follow through on those choices. A coach can help them make wise choices, and a coach can help them overcome barriers, self-doubt, you know, fear of failure, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, it's the individual themselves, isn't it, that has to take action. Yeah, absolutely.
So so I mean, thanks so much for the information shared. Any you know, specific 2 tips for the audience for us to hear? Why should coaching be a part of the culture, and what is the impact, you know, and is it to look at from a top down, bottom up, or you know, just some parting words from your end, from your experience, from both of you?
Okay, so I would say that, you know, if you think about sales enablement and the sort of things you might put in place to help your sellers. If we think of the traditional stuff, the sales training, you know, the access to content and playbooks and these sorts of things, you're going to give them you're going to add to their potential, right? You know, you're going to expand their horizons. You're going to give them more stuff that they can do. But really, coaching looks at that from a very different point of view and asks, well, what's getting in the way? What might we remove? You know, what are the obstacles to the individual sellers deploying those things? Are they've got all the tools in the world, but they're really experiencing rejection fatigue because this week everyone said no, 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 no. Well, there's no point throwing more training at them. It's not going to address that problem, you know. So coaching, I think, can be the missing link in a sales enablement approach because it has a different viewpoint, and the viewpoint is what is getting in people's way. Right. You know, what do we need to take away from them rather than what do we need to add to them? So there's one tip to finish on from me.
I like that. What do we need to take away than to what you add? What not to do rather than what to do?
Of course, yeah. Why not? Yeah.
Always the focus is what to do. So let's, if you focus on what not to do, then what to do just comes out clear. Amazing. So Ahmed, from your end?
Well, I think you guys both covered a lot of ground. One thought that I could probably leave everybody with is I think coaching is just a nice, very practical way of sharing wisdom with the team.
Okay.
It's a support tool. We are all, as human beings, are not capable of seeing a 360 picture around us. We're always find it tough to be, extremely honest with ourselves or grounded. For those and so many more different reasons, coaching is the supporting tool, supporting mechanism, where people take care of each other and help each other grow and share the wisdom together.
Yeah.
And it's no wonder where companies that implement a lot of coaching find the results better, because the people grow. And I don't mean grow in their performance or their results, but as mature, wise individuals, they are capable of making better decisions and encountering situations with a bit more tact and a little bit more, I guess, better approach for everybody is the word that I want to use. It really, it's how we say group think. When everybody is stuck in the same, this is kind of group growing together rather than an individual just growing by themselves. This is really where companies grow together as teams. I find a lot of people really appreciate the periods where they've been coached or coach somebody. They cherish those times of their lives, and they always constantly reflect on them and how much of a difference it made in their lives. And when you hear that, that's just a statement of the impact of coaching on people's lives.
Yeah. And also I think the fact that being coached doesn't mean that you're incapable. It means that there are certain things, a lot of them have this inhibition of being coached because they feel, oh, do I not know many things that I need to be coached? So it is not about incapability. That is why you're being coached. But the fact that there are a lot of things within you, probably you have not identified, which a coach can help you, bring that out in you and then enable those and see that your strengths are really identified and you can, play on those.
I think it's a statement of love. If somebody is willing to coach you, somebody loves you, likes you, they take interest in you, they want to not necessarily help you because you're incapable, but because they have your interest in mind, and they want to be there for you. I think coaching is just like I wear glasses. I'm nearsighted, and coaching sometimes is just like wearing glasses. You just see clearer. It's a tool that helps you see things clearer, crispier. It's easier to make decisions. It gives you that more confidence, and it definitely helps me decide where to go.
It's like a GPS. You're right. That's an amazing statement. It's like wearing those glasses and seeing things clear, and doing and letting them know what not to do rather than to do. I think these are really amazing statements, and thank you so much. It's always a pleasure, and I've been coached by both of you at some point in time, and it's been amazing. And I know that you love me so much, and that's why want to see my success. Ahmed, you and me discuss so much, right? So thanks so much for your time, and
You're
you
amazing.
investing your time.
Yeah,
so thank you.